everybody. Thank you very much for coming to the Bastiat Society of Raleigh. It is Wednesday, October 11, 2023, and we are very pleased that we have such a nice turnout. We are having Professor Michael Munger. We are going to be implementing a kind of a membership thing. We were going to have some QR codes, which we think is really super advanced technology for us.
We do have some QR codes. I know just where they are at my house.
And so basically, I just wanted to let you know, it costs about $25 a head for us to have this event, and we welcome all newcomers for however long they want. But like I tell people, if you come to a party long enough with your friends and you don't bring beer, people are going to say, hey, bring some beer. Okay, so that's pretty much what we're about. And Richard, do you have a couple things you wanted to say?
No.
Okay.
Do you ever meet those people, the introducers, who say, tonight's speaker needs no introduction? And then they give you a long introduction? It's so annoying, so annoying. So I'm not going to be annoying. I give you Professor Mike Munger.
So I hate introductions. I've never understood them. Google is your friend. I would rather have more space for questions on the other side. So I'm trying to duck every time I see Brian Balfour, because I was supposed to have this report to the Locke Foundation no later than August 1st, and I still haven't actually sent the report. But I do have a presentation, which I'm going to give you tonight. So, Distilling Change, Reforming the NC-ABC System. So, this is the sort of thing that gets me in trouble on Twitter. So, Governor Kathy Hochul of New York, with the Buffalo Bills playing across the pond on Sunday morning, I know fans will be gathering for the big game and they may fancy a pint. I'm directing the state liquor authority to extend the deadline for special permits, so sports and bars and restaurants can serve as early as 8 a.m. Fine, that's what politicians do. Some half-wit then says, now this is what good government looks like. Did I let that go? No. I said a remarkable claim. So your theory is that when the slave owner gives the slaves a day off, the slaves should be grateful for slavery. This is more like, this is what Stockholm Syndrome looks like. So if you have a stupid damn regulation, which occasionally you relax and try to claim credit for it, that's like the arsonist claiming credit because they called the fire department. So I want to make two prefatory remarks. Every item that I identify as a cost, and this is true of a number of other people who study economics, is not just an admitted, but an embraced benefit by the ABC authorities. So I'm going to give a list of what I consider to be costs of the current system. But if you remember nothing else about what I say tonight, remember the second part. This is not really very controversial, except that the proponents of the system put the opposite sign on them. All of those things count as benefits. And so what I have to try to do is not persuade you about the list of things, but rather to say that they are costs rather than benefits. So it took me a long time to understand that, but I think it's the key to understanding North Carolina's ABC system. Not just the way the system works, but why it is so resistant to change. And it's very resistant to change. So, this being the Bastiat Society, I wanted to start out with Bastiat's Negative Railroad. Have any of you ever read Bastiat's Negative Railroad? Other than Richard? So, Bastiat is talking about a proposal. There is a train that is going to go from Madrid to Paris and carry a lot of cargo. Now, the French are trying to decide what gauge railroad to connect up with the train when it crosses the Spanish-French border. And at first they think, well, it should be the same one so the train can just go through. But then they said, wait, think of all the jobs that will be created if we have a different gauge railroad. Because then we'll have to transship all of this stuff. We'll take it off the boxcars and put it on the narrower gauge boxcars.
Brilliant.
And Bastiat said, well, hell, you're just not going far enough. You need to do that every mile. Wait, every half mile. Wait, we don't need a railroad at all. We'll just have porters hand the stuff from Madrid to Paris. Think of all the jobs that will create. So we called that a negative railroad. It wouldn't be a railroad at all, but it would be maximizing the number of jobs. So when I whine and complain, like an economist does, about the number of jobs in the ABC system, those are benefits. I see them as costs. So I want to try to be honest about that. If you're worried about creating jobs, you may not be persuaded by what I'm going to argue tonight. So North Carolina is one of 17 control states, and all 50 states require licensing for the production and sale of spirits. But 17 states control directly control one of the three aspects, which is production and distilling, warehousing and distribution, wholesaling, or retail sales. So the control states directly control one of those, at least one of those three. North Carolina controls all three of those, which is licensing of distilling, distribution and wholesaling, and retailing. So the state systems are actually very complicated. Control, not control, is it ABC, is it separate package stores, is it sold at grocery stores? And the number of states here add up to more than 50, because some of them are in multiple categories. Maryland, for example, is in multiple categories because Montgomery County is a control county all by itself. So it's very complicated to look at comparing other states. So I should give the ABC Commission its due. Quoting now from their account, the ABC Commission is not supported by taxpayers and receives no support from the state government. Now, socialism is state ownership of the means and output of production. However, the ABC system, to be fair, is not socialistic, because none of the liquor is owned by the state of North Carolina. It's actually amazing. None of the liquor is owned by the state of North Carolina. It operates under a bailment system. There is one warehouse in the state of North Carolina. If you want to sell spirituous liquors, you have to pay to ship, and you have to pay a licensed trucker, and there aren't that many of them. So they're able to charge much higher prices. It goes to the single state warehouse in South Raleigh, and it is there owned by the producer. So you have to pay for it to be there on the shelf. They charge you for the warehouse space. It's called a bailment fee. If any of the ABC stores around the state order some of that, you then have to pay to have it shipped from the warehouse to that ABC store. And there's no reason to expect that any of them will want that. Now, liquor doesn't go bad. It's actually okay if it's another year old. But you have a lot of capital tied up in having that stuff sitting there. Now, the way that North Carolina makes its money is that they charge an 86, not 85, not 87, an 86% markup, whatever the wholesale price that the retailer wants to sell. So say it's $1, price goes to $1.86, and then that is the price, the free on board price where it's delivered to the ABC store. They add a bunch of other costs. All of their costs are added on top of that. So that's the distribution system. So the state and local operation of the ABC system is receipt supported rather than being supported by taxes, is their claim. That's because they sell it and take 86% on top of whatever the wholesale cost was. So one way we could do this is to have private stores have it sold and collect a tax. Then we would say that's tax supported. Another way we could do it is have a much higher price in a lot fewer stores and sell it and take almost half of the revenue, and that's not a tax because that's revenue. This is revenue supported. So when they say it's not tax supported, there's a little bit of linguistic legerdemain at work there. They're just skipping the middleman and directly taking the money from people who buy liquor. There's tax added on top of that. So, to remind you, the 3 stages are manufacture, distilling, wholesaling, distribution, and retail sales. Now, North Carolina may be the prohibitionist-est state. So we started, the first attempts by the legislature to outlaw completely the commercial sale of alcohol were in 1852. There was a statewide referendum, and it read as follows: the General Assembly of North Carolina will be fully requested to pass an absolute and unqualified prohibition law imposing penalties for the manufacture and sale of intoxicating liquor as a beverage. Now, this was rejected, 166,000 to 48,000, because of a lot of advertising by the manufacturers of spirituous liquors in the last 2 weeks, which changed the way that people thought about regulating alcohol. It changed the way that, I don't know another way to put it, Baptists thought about regulating alcohol, because they had it and the cup was dashed from their, well, that's the wrong metaphor. They were prevented from achieving their objective by last-minute advertising by the manufacturers of spirituous liquors. So in 1901, the Anti-Saloon League was established. This was in keeping with the women's temperance movement. With the political muscle of the ASL, the Watts Act was passed. The Watts Act was trying to drive liquor out of the unpoliced rural communities. So the act provided there could be no liquor manufactured or sold outside of incorporated towns, and a plan of local option was established. So that's the second important thing. First, if we have a statewide referendum, it will be possible for liquor manufacturers to manipulate with advertising. But if we have many local elections, it will be much more difficult. The second thing is that the Watts Act made it illegal to sell liquor in any community of 1,000 or less. Now that might strike you as being not that unreasonable, but there was no town of 1,000 in 68 of the 100 counties. 68 of the 100 North Carolina counties had only towns smaller than 1,000. It was a very rural state. 1908, the anti-saloon referendum was passed, no bars or saloons. 1920, of course, we get the passage of the amendment for prohibition, the 18th Amendment. 1923, the Turlington Act implements prohibition. 1933, we get the end of national prohibition, but the Turlington Act, rather than being struck down, so North Carolina continued to have prohibition after the 21st Amendment, because the state act was still in place. The Turlington Act was still in place. And the Turlington Act is different from literally any other state prohibition law. It was really focused on local control. They were really concerned about the possibility that there could be statewide advertising that would be funded by manufacturers. They felt they had been stung by that in 1881. So, 1937, South Carolina starts to license private package stores, and the rule was that you could not advertise. So you couldn't say, you could have 3-inch high letters, it could say liquor store, but of course you couldn't see that from very far away. So what South Carolina did, this is actually an interesting sort of focal point or Schelling point story. South Carolina one seller had two big red dots, and in the middle of it, there was the words liquor seller, but you really couldn't see it, but you could see the red dots. And so other sellers said, we're gonna put red dots. And there's nothing illegal about having red dots. So if you drove anywhere in South Carolina between the 60s and about 2000, those are red dot stores. So they were private, but the origin of the red dots was a restriction on the ability to advertise, and all advertised was have a sign that said, we sell liquor here. So North Carolina did not. South Carolina went to private package stores. Virginia had a state monopoly, but the state ABC stores are operated entirely by the state. North Carolina went to a unique system that is completely decentralized, and it has local ABC councils. There's no other state remotely like that. I consider that to be harmful. There's 178 of these local ABC councils. They each have separate bureaucracies. They each have a 5-member council that is separately elected. As we'll see, there's one county, Brunswick County, which has 9 ABC councils. The average salary of the commissioner of the ABC council is $250,000. There's 170 of these. Do I consider that a cost? Yes. Do the 170 people who gets this local corrupt appointment consider it a benefit? Damn right they do. Chicago ward bosses would say, gosh, I wish we thought of that. That's really great. They're all separately elected, and they've got these little employment factories in tiny communities. There's 9 of them in Brunswick County, he said, his voice rising in indignation. So North Carolina is the prohibitionist state. And so you see people running because the sun's coming up, it's prohibition, but notice the date is May 27th, 1908. And it says, the sun will rise tomorrow on a state redeemed from the whiskey evil. Saloons and dispensaries will be hunting for a city of refuge. And it was only in 30 counties where there could be any dispensaries, because that was how many there were that had towns of over 1,000. So the central features of the ABC system are that there's a central single warehouse operated under contract with a private company that does the storage, and the state doesn't own any of that liquor. It's held there with bailment charges. There's 170 local ABC boards. Each operates 1 or more retail outlets. There's 433 retail outlets in the state. 60%, or 102 of those ABC councils, operate a single store. So there's entire accounting and bureaucracy to operate a single store, often in a tiny community. 40% operate multiple stores, obviously. There's nearly 3,000 people, just over 6 per store. In 2021, they sold 80 million bottles, 64 of those the regular quart or fifths. So there's the distribution. There's 5 ABC boards that have 5 or more stores. There's 102 that have just 1. There's a fixed markup on the wholesale price, and I really already talked about this. There's an 86% markup, and that includes freight, the bailment fee, a surcharge that funds the ABC Commission's budget. If that's not a tax, I don't know what it is. There's 170 people making an average of $250,000 per year, and that comes from that revenue source. Now you can say that's not a tax, but that's just stretching what language means. There's a state tax. There is a state tax, of course. There's a state liquor tax. The local ABC board markup, a rehabilitation tax, which is to pay for treatment for people who drink too much for alcoholism. So it is a way of funding. It's a way of the North Carolina Education Lottery also does this. They have to pay for advertising saying, buy the lottery, but not too much. So the goals, as far as I can tell, are maximize cost, minimize convenience, and inhibit consumption. Given those goals, this system is a success. So if we look, and this may not be easy to see, but that column is revenue per wine gallon for southern states. North Carolina stands at 36.79% of, for each wine gallon is revenue that goes to the ABC system. That is by far the largest in the South. Now, is that a tax? If revenue taken by a government agency is the largest proportion of any state in the South, that's a tax. If it quacks and looks like a duck, it's a duck. And then, this is adult per capita liquor consumption, is, again, in wine gallons, that's 1.72. There is one state that is less, West Virginia is 1.27. All of the other states are substantially larger, and of course Louisiana is 2.69. If you're on the street, the cops will say, "Have you got any liquor?" You say no, they'll give you some. So notice that Louisiana is only collecting 9.18% revenue per wine gallon, whereas North Carolina is nearly 40%. So if your claim is this system is working well for citizens, it is producing a lot of revenue, and it is probably playing some role in keeping people from drinking by making it inconvenient and expensive to drink. I don't see, well, it's hard for me to imagine that being the objective of any commercial establishment. But it is the objective of the ABC system. And to be fair, there are plenty of people who think that it should be. So it's fine for me to make fun of it, but I'm one of those crazy libertarians. So one of the claims is that North Carolina, because of the sacred EBC system, is better able to reduce the costs of excessive alcohol consumption. So I put together a table of total cost and total cost per capita, and North Carolina is right in the middle of cost per capita of excessive alcohol consumption. There's not really much difference among the states. South Carolina, of course, has the most, but you'd expect that. You know those people. And the smallest is Georgia, but basically we're talking about something that's within the standard error of these estimates. These are not significantly different. So if your claim is that we're paying all of these extra costs and inconvenience because we want to reduce the cost of excess alcohol consumption, it's not working. Unless you think that North Carolina would just be way higher otherwise. I don't think there's any reason to think it's that different. These are other southern states after all. We're not talking about Boston, which is impossible. So Wake County has 25 stores, 1 ABC. Mecklenburg has 27 stores, 1 ABC. Brunswick County has 11 stores and 9 ABCs. And you can see there, all those blue dots are separate alcoholic beverage control councils, each of which has a local election. But my favorite thing about Brunswick County, when we see it has 9 different bureaucratic structures, each with its own separate elections, and this is in one county of 130,000 people. There's not much profits, but there's substantial revenues. $24 million in revenues in 2019. Some of y'all may know this, but, well, let me ask, what is the county seat of Brunswick County? It is Bolivia. Why? In 1975, the good citizens of Brunswick County said, you know, the interior of this county is losing out. So they looked at the county seat, which was then in Southport, and they said, we're going to move it to Bolivia. Because Bolivia had been cut off, Highway 17 went through Bolivia, and there were at least some people there. Then they built the government built a bypass, And so Bolivia was in trouble. They moved the county seat there. Today, it's a great success story. Population of Bolivia has risen to 152. By far the smallest county seat in North Carolina. It's just remarkable. They do have an ABC store. I mean, the county commissioners need to drink. So, elected officials chosen by local voters get to charge substantial implicit taxes on beach people that are coming through. And these 9 different local organizations get to create jobs and distribute revenue for their friends. So this is basically a so-called the rich damn Yankees who come through here on their way to the beach strategy.
Yeah, because all the locals go to South Carolina.
It's not that far to North Myrtle. You can go to a red dot store in North Myrtle and pick up some fireworks while you're there. So, more seriously, now ending this system would require solving the classic transitional gains trap problem. What we've done, in effect, is create what people see as a set of property rights, and it's actually hard to say they're wrong. There's this system, and they have in good faith operated according to that system, and it produces a lot of revenues and a lot of jobs. And I've been snarky, but let me say, the people who work at ABC stores are good people. They're hardworking people. They were hired for these jobs. Their pensions were something that they were offered. There's a contract with the state. I'm not trying to say that the workers who work at the ABC stores are doing anything wrong. It's the system itself that creates a problem. So if we were to change the system over to, for example, private package stores, so one of the least aggressive reforms would be to allow wholesale and distribution according to a licensing system rather than having this one distribution center warehouse, which is nuts. No other state does that. But it is a way of exercising control, and it dramatically increases the price. The thing is that it appears to increase the price that is being charged by that greedy wholesaler. Because they have to charge not just a price that pays for the liquor, but pays for the fact that the liquor is going to sit in that warehouse for 14 months before some ABC store orders it. So they have to charge a much higher price up front, which then the state attaches an 86% surcharge on. So they get not just the original price, but they profit from the fact that it sits there for 14 months. That's a benefit to the state. You think it's a cost, it's a benefit if you take that perspective. So the following issues would require legislative consideration if the local ABC boards were dissolved and their stores were closed. There's about 3,000 full-time and part-time employees. Their employment would be terminated if local ABC stores were closed, and each local ABC board would be responsible for managing the reduction in force. Legislature could consider establishing a system-wide process for doing that. Some kind of buyout package, maybe $10,000 per person is the kind of thing that's been proposed. If you multiply 10,000 times 3,000, of course, you get 30 million. And that's just to buy out the existing employees. Many of them also have pensions, which we would have to continue to honor, which is fair enough, it's a contract. So I'm not saying they did anything wrong, but that is an obligation that the state has incurred. So Gordon Tullock, when he wrote about the transitional gains trap, the argument behind the transitional gains trap is that if you're comparing two different states of the world, and one of them is far more economically efficient, and you're at one that is inefficient, the costs of moving between them may outweigh the benefits that are the difference between the two states of the world. It's very expensive to move to the more efficient system. So North Carolina had I don't want to offend anyone, some of y'all may have been tobacco farmers, but North Carolina had a quota system, and those quotas created very substantial value. It was not real value. It was a value that was created by an artificial restriction on the ability of people to grow and sell tobacco, but it was valuable. So to get rid of the tobacco quota system, we had to buy the quota. It was really expensive. So the transitional gains trap means you have to pay attention to the payments that you have to make in order to get consent. So in this case, there are thousands and thousands of people. Now, there's millions of people in the state of North Carolina. How could thousands outweigh millions? Most people, if you ask them, should we reform the ABC system? They say, yeah. Most employees, if you ask them, should we reform the ABC system? Why, hell no! I work there. They will fight it. The commissioners that are making $250,000, they will fight it. And so we've got pop-up lobbyists that are going to make it very difficult to reform this system. So I'm happy to share this PowerPoint. There's a lot of details here about pension and post-employment benefits, which I'm not going to go through, but as I've already said, we would be obliged to pay the pension benefits. Now, again, often seen as a benefit is the fact that local counties or ABC stores own substantial amounts of valuable property. Now, I see that as a cost because I would like to use an accounting system that takes account of the opportunity cost of capital investment. It should be earning some sort of return. States don't do that. State governments pretty much never do that. There's this capital asset land that we own, and we don't care if it gets any return or not. The fact that we have acres and acres of this, it's free to us because we get to use it. So they don't count that as a cost. If we were to sell off all those assets, there's at least, it has been estimated, at least $250 million of a one-time improvement in the state's budget. So we close the ABC stores, and a lot of these are perfectly nice, many of them pretty new, commercial buildings. They're already zoned for commerce. Or maybe some of them would be torn down. The land itself is pretty valuable, at least $250 million, which I count as a benefit, which many local people would count as a cost. So the government appointing authority would have to determine the disposition of capital assets, including whether the stores would be sold to private retail businesses that are authorized to sell liquor. And there's hundreds of these. So in terms of bureaucracy and a potential for corruption, it's pretty substantial. So people's opinions, there was an Elon University poll and a High Point poll. Support for closing ABC is between 47 and 52%. Opposed closing ABC was 32 or 34%, and something like a fifth of people didn't know or refused to answer. So barely a majority, if that, actually support closing it, which means that this is not something that a member of the legislature is going to be able to run on and be assured that he or she is going to do well the next time there's an election. Because you can be sure there are at least dozens of people that are going to be really pissed off. And if it's in Brunswick County, there's going to be hundreds of people that are really pissed off. Because all of them depend for their livelihoods, and their families depend for their livelihoods on this corrupt system. So, a little more granular, any store that currently sells beer or wine should receive a permit to sell liquor. 56% in the Elon poll and 49% in the High Point poll were in favor of that. Stores that only sell liquor should receive a permit to sell liquor, and these add up more or less to 100%. So if you add 56% and 31% from the Elon poll, those are the people who favor at least privatization. So the private package stores, in addition to the ABC system, you could have the ABC system, but then you also would have a parallel system. The main thing is this would require getting rid of all the proposals for reform would get rid of the central warehouse. Grocery stores, for example, have pretty elaborate supply chain arrangements where they can have trucks. They have trucks. Every day these trucks go to the grocery stores. I've seen them. Well, they could carry liquor. It is pretty easy. They're already set up to be able to provide those things. The marginal cost to grocery stores would be negligible. the difference in the cost of having to ship it to a warehouse, store it for months and months, and then ship it again, that doesn't seem like a cost because it's just money that is being spent on revenue to participants in this system. But it's wasted. It's wasted in the sense that there's no reason to pay that. Now, I want to give you some idea of the statutes that have been used to create, well, power. And this is Pamlico County. I picked too much on Brunswick County. So this is the actual statute. It provides for small town mixed beverage elections. A town may hold a mixed beverage election if the town has at least 200 registered voters and is located in a county bordering the Neuse River and Pamlico Sound that has not approved the sale of mixed beverages, and that county has only one city that has approved the sale of mixed beverages. There's exactly one county that meets. Now, they could have just said, Pamlico County, do what you want. But instead, they wrote general legislation, every single county of which the following things are true. Not that many border the Neuse River and the Pamlico Sound to begin with. So anyway, Pamlico County has 13,000. The city of Bayboro has 1.2 thousand population. And Bayboro was approved to have its own, they got a waiver to have their own ABC system. So I think there's 7 big questions. Terminating government controls of retail liquor sales would require the enactment of regulatory requirements for private retail businesses. So, what types of stores would be authorized to sell liquor? How many stores? Would you have to be licensed? Would there have to be something like certificates of need, where you would ask the existing stores, do we need more liquor stores? They probably say no. But that's exactly how the ABC system works. There's a number of counties in North Carolina that have one ABC store. You have to drive 40 or 50 or 60 miles. Now, I wouldn't do this, but there are people who on the way back think, hell, I've got liquor now. I'm gonna drink some. So the result is an increase, not a decrease, in alcohol abuse. Where would stores selling liquor be located? We could just allow people to go nuts and say, I'd like to open a liquor store here. And if it doesn't make profits, that's a sign that there's not enough people who want to pay the price. That's probably not what we would do, even if it got rid of the ABC system. When, hours and days, would stores be authorized to sell liquor? What would we do about the wholesale system? Would we replace with a 3-tier system? Because North Carolina, almost alone among states, has a 3-tier system. We could maintain at least state regulation of all 3, or could we deregulate it? And what should the tax rate be? Now, it could be that we want to try to keep this revenue neutral. We could raise the tax sales rate in order to be able to collect something like the same revenue. Or we could allow people to keep more of the money that they earn and spend it on things that they want. So it seems to me that, again, this is an illustration of the problem of me counting these taxes as a cost. But for many people, high alcohol taxes is a way of keeping our weaker brothers and sisters, not us, of course, because we can handle it. If you're a legislator, well, I'm not going to even say that. I'm sure that no legislators drink. That's just a rumor. But our weaker brothers and sisters need to have high taxes to keep them from over-consuming. And so we want to charge a tax rate that keeps the price up. I have a bunch of proposals for reducing the price of liquor. I clearly don't get it. Lower price of liquor is a cost, not a benefit. And so I think it is, although I have been snarky, it is possible to argue on the other side that many of these things that I'm trying to count as costs of the current system, in fact, are benefits. And so again, if you remember nothing else about what I said tonight, it should be that. Thanks for listening.
Thank you very much, Mike. That was fantastic. I've always wondered, being from California, why it is you can't go to a store and you can't get liquor, but that explains it. So I just want to let you know that next month, November 8th, we're having an exciting author come to speak and tell us about her book, Just the Truth. This is her first novel that she wrote. Basically, it's about a woman who is with a big media family, and she sets about, this book was written in 2019, exposing the federal election scheme of the current president. And I actually was riveted by this book. I am not kidding, this is a very well-written book. And she won a ton of awards for the movie version, which we're gonna watch in the other room. There's a big screen television. And get her early, because I want to start at like 4:45, so it's an hour, it's like an hour and 45 minutes, and she's gonna be here. We're flying her in from Indiana. And she has started basically an artist kind of community where she lives that's devoted to writing literature and fiction about issues that we care about. Freedom of speech, entrepreneurship, capitalism, and where's Richard? Richard?
He just went up there.
Oh, well, I was going to tell him he'd be proud because she was inspired by Ayn Rand. So anyway, I know that Michael Farrell has a couple of things he wanted to tell us, because he and his friend Jen are starting a establishment that's going to sell, oh my goodness, beer, right, in Raleigh.
Yeah.
And they're going to encourage people to come and read literature, classical liberal stuff, right? Come on up and tell us about that really, really briefly.
Great. Yeah, so I'll keep it pretty brief and let Jim and Neri tell you a bit more about what we have going on. So essentially, it was kind of born out of the idea of the Inklings, where you had Tolkien and Lewis meeting at Oxford University in the UK, and they would get together to discuss Lord of the Rings, they would discuss Chronicles of Narnia, and we wanted to create a space where those kinds of conversations could flourish. And simultaneously, something exciting that's coming up for our bookshop brew pub, and we might have some brewery operations, is there's the Mises Carolinas Club, some of you might be familiar with. So they're partnered with the Mises Institute at Auburn, and we have a lot of Austrian influence on our business philosophy. And from that Auburn relationship, the Mises Carolinas Club, they do quarterly events. So the next one, I think January 27 is going to be our location. Basically, Creedmoor and Strickland, just south of 540, and working out like what kind of speakers, what kind of entrepreneurs. But we met a master German brewer at the very first one of those events down in Fuquay Arena of Aviator Brewing. So I don't know what kind of business relationship that's going to end up looking like, but Jim can tell you a bit more about what the mission is.
Yeah, first I would like to say thank you to Professor Munger. As somebody who has to pay $300 an hour to an attorney to help me navigate this ABC thing right now, and I sit there with customers who want to give me money and I can't sell them alcohol. This is really helpful to understand exactly why. I was a classical educator for 12 years, and many people used to tell me, I wish I had this education when I was a kid. Grandparents and parents, and I began to dream of an opportunity for us to provide such a place, a place for folks to gather, to eat, to drink, to laugh, to discuss, to read great literature. My grand vision is to be a part of saving the West, as I think it is in decline, but that might be too grand a vision to fit on a website or really to make any sense to anyone. But our hope is to cultivate the great conversation through great literature, programs, and great food, great beer, great wine, great coffee. We'd love for you all to come out and participate in that with us.
And it's called Bayo's Books and Brews. I did give the website to Brad so he can get it to you, or you can reach out to us.
We're going to have you post it again on our Facebook page.
Okay,
Yeah,
great.
thank you so much. Mike, I forgot to open it up to Q&A. What am I doing? Don't we have some questions for Mike? He just walked off the stage so quick. And I'm like, let's just get
I
this.
wasn't the speaker anymore.
Yeah, well, sorry. But I was like, what the heck am I doing? I forgot to get the Q&A going. So go ahead. answer some questions.
So, the state would have interest, I think, in selling illicit beverages and drugs to folks?
The state would have an interest in selling illicit drugs?
Yeah, currently illicit drugs to folks.
Illicit is a
Marijuana
carefully
and,
chosen word. Do you mean illegal?
Narcotic, yeah, those are.
Like alcohol?
No, and turn the alcohol system completely loose. Use ABC stores for those.
So we could use ABM stores, no, MBC stores.
Whatever they're called.
Not, it wouldn't be marijuana beverage. So, North Carolina's having a lot of trouble legalizing illicit drugs. There doesn't seem to be much support for it in the legislature. We can't even get medical marijuana.
Well, they're very close to marijuana, I think.
It would certainly be, it would be an interesting part of the package. I had not thought of that. So we're worried about tax revenue. And so part of deregulating ABC would be legalizing and taxing marijuana at least, is your proposal.
Marijuana and heroin and all the other drugs that people use.
Okay, no. I'm a crazy libertarian. There's probably 3 other people in this room, and that means there's 7 in the whole state that think heroin's. Roy, I know, but well, Roy's a user, yeah. So. But there's really no chance of the ABC system being changed. There's very little chance of marijuana being legalized and taxed. If we had heroin, I think it won't do. Although, of course, you're right on the merits. That's one of the annoying things about libertarians. They're almost always right on the merits. Look in the mirror and say, damn, you're right. Once you ever die, you look good.
So the legislature in the past has made some kind of incremental changes to loosen restrictions on alcohol sales, the brunch bill, and craft brewing, some other things. Is there a way that this can be done incrementally? Because it seems like that's just the modus operandi of our legislature.
Well, in politics, it generally is because as you see, the margin is razor thin in opinion polls, and those are not people who vote on this issue. They vote on other issues. I don't see a way of doing it incrementally because qualitatively, these are publicly owned stores that are owned by strange little local bureaucracies. And if you take any part of that, then you make it so they no longer get all those rents. So if you have some ideas about it, do it incrementally, that would be great.
That was what I was gonna bring up. Could demographics, when you go to a grocery store, go to a Target or Walmart, many times you're having to self-check out. Could we come to a time that there's not enough employees? And it just makes sense to just move it over to the retail can do it, they'll just tax it, and the state will take it and pay out pensions and all that other stuff.
A restaurant may have trouble hiring people.
Yes.
No ABC store does because they can decide their own wages and pensions, and those things come directly out of a cost plus revenue system. So a restaurant may have trouble, but if you're a monopoly, people are still gonna buy ABC. So if you're paying $22, $25 an hour with a pension, people are still gonna work at ABC stores. I don't think that this will be the last place. Target has trouble, restaurants have trouble. ABC stores don't. It's a good job. Joe Biden would approve.
To take it even further, when we're looking at the state of North Carolina, South Carolina, Virginia, or I'm sorry, North Carolina, Virginia, North Carolina, Tennessee, do people on the border choose to go across the border?
Yeah.
Okay.
But paradoxically, Mecklenburg outperformed Wake in liquor sales last year. I cannot figure out why. Because nobody I know that lives in Mecklenburg County buys liquor in Mecklenburg County. They all go to South Carolina.
I think it was Hornets fans.
They were not.
Panthers fans dressed in sorrows.
Those folks need to drink. One more question or comment.
I have a quick question. So do they publish the individual store
there is one of the, in 2008, there was in 2008 and then again in 2017, the legislature commissioned studies about the lack of transparency of what the spending was on. So they published their revenue, but you can't get what they spent it on. And that opacity of spending means it's hard to say. The money goes somewhere. And none of it's probably illegal. So it's not being embezzled. They don't have to embezzle it. They can just pay each other. 170 people making $250,000 each. Now some are lower, some are higher, but that's more than the governor. Of course, they had a better year than the governor. Well, please.
I can wait offline if it's easier.
You should, by all means.
All right, so I had what I thought was an interesting idea that I've run into the ABC board with. Craft beer production in North Carolina is overbuilt. All these brewers have more capacity than they themselves can churn out. So I wanted to have our own line at Bayos of our beers, and I've gotten several brewers that said they would brew our beer, it would be beneficial to them, beneficial to us because I don't need to invest the millions of dollars of infrastructure. And the ABC attorney, that is my attorney, said it would be very difficult to pull that off because the ABC board has such restrictive walls between that wholesale, distributor, retailer.
But this is for beer.
Yes, and it's even with that very difficult to overcome any of those walls. So his solution was you would need to lease a 5 foot by 5 foot space in every brewer that you made this deal with, that you can prove when the ABC inspector comes down to look at your facility, you put an old tank there and you say, this is the spot where I brew my beer. And so you highlighted the problems with the liquor sales.
Yeah, this is only spirituous liquor.
Yes, but it is a broad problem with even beer, and that seems to be, does that seem to be an easier battle to win since there's so much, as you shared, of why counties and these local groups won't want to give it up? Is the place to maybe win is on beer and wine?
The amount of money that goes to beer distributors in North Carolina, because you have to have an exclusive license with a distributor, and sometimes it's hard to find one, which means that there's a certain amount of economies of scale. You have to be a certain size before you can sell to any grocery stores if you're a brewer, because you have to sell to a bunch, because you have to have an exclusive contract with a distributor. There's a lot of states that do that. That appears to be impossible to get rid of. So the amount of money that's paid to distributors for beers nationwide is just gigantic. That actually seems like a harder problem because it's just a set aside for people who have some trucks. But it's outrageous, and it means that if you actually want to start a small brewery, there's two different problems that you face that involve economies of scale. It's very hard. Now, you can brew it and sell it in your restaurant. But if you're going to actually try to distribute it, you have to have enough to be able to take it, to be able to make sense to have a significant brewing operation, which requires a lot of production in order to justify that upfront investment. And then you have to have a contract with the distributor where I don't remember, but I think there's estimates of at least 30 or 40 retail outlets before it makes sense for you to have it in the first one. Because the distributor's not going to accept a contract to take it to, because it has to be exclusive. And that's a problem that many states have. So that distribution contract exclusivity is something that a lot of states have done, and most people just don't care much about it. It's pennies per bottle of beer. But for those distributors, it's life and death. So it's been very difficult to get rid of. So I don't see any hope in that direction. Your idea is a good one, but I mean, you're actually proposing fibbing?
Well, the idea would be, we would simply be the producer.
But you put an old tank there and say that's where we.
Well, that's what
it's
the lawyer
not
said.
true.
I'm not doing
The
that.
lawyer said that.
Yes.
This is legal advice.
Yes.
Holy smokes!
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
You just need to Phil Berger on your side and have him pass it by the Senate and put it in the budget. It becomes a negotiable item.
There's something wrong with you. We met at a Durham Bulls game and I knew it then, but Joe.
Just on the tax rate side, this doesn't address many of the other questions that you had, but on the tax rate side, the one thing that you could do, because there is the consumption question, right, of how high can taxes be, how do you accomplish that? But could there be an option that you have a state tax rate that is either revenue neutral or below, and then you allow local places like Brunswick to be able to increase their tax, because there's the number of legislators who go by this actually reduces consumption, regardless of what the evidence is on that side, would say, oh, okay, well, if we can reduce consumption by having a higher tax, let's go with a really high tax, and so you can potentially. I don't know if you buy off of that in terms of the individual boards, but.
I would like that because in my view, most of the current system is dead weight losses. At least that would produce revenue.
Right.
So I still think it's a bad idea, but it's a way better idea than what we have now, where we just dissipate all of the resources on make work jobs.
Yeah, it depends on the board, and then you can work, then you can go to Dennis and
Well, or it's still revenue. I don't mind counties having revenue. That it's pouring it down the rat hole that's upsetting. Well, all right. Thank you all so much. You will
There are 9 or 10 copies of this book out there. I asked Jen to please send me some. Please grab one, and I will see you next month. Thank you.